Okay, it's Sunday and it's Easter, which is a time of new life. So I got inspired to make a video about nature and life and drawing. And I'm going to connect it to particularly to people who are studying, students, and want to improve their drawing. And I got a few tips about that. So really something that I'm really big on is going back to nature. And what does that mean? It means studying nature and acknowledging nature as the source of so much. And I mean, in the older schools of painting and drawing, this was really emphasized. You had to do a step-by-step progressive course of learning where you expanded from simpler things to more complex things. And it always involved the study of nature in terms of the laws of light, how shadows fall, natural forms, and really using your eyes and mind to study those and remember them. So today I was really inspired by looking at some of these. This is from my deck. These had all fallen on my deck. I'll see if I can zoom in. And not the skull, that's just a model of but this is Twiggy. It's my favorite twig from, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And it's by no means unique. There's nothing magical about this twig, but if it's magical, everything's magical, because I just love looking at the natural forms. And you can learn so much about drawing in various ways. And you can learn about form, anatomy, rhythm, natural rhythm in drawing. And you can apply it to things like inking. So, because too often what people do, I've done it, is you fall into your own ruts and you don't compare to nature, which is the source of life and vitality. So people make up very mechanical and static ways of doing things. But if you look at some of these different forms, they give you all kinds of ideas. Like, this is just a random piece of bark that fell on our deck from a tree. It was an old tree that they cut down, so it's now gone. Goodbye, tree. But there's the color and texture, and I'm going to relate all this in a moment to drawing. And or things like this is, I guess, an oak leaf. And if you see the shapes, they're very powerful lines, and they have a certain rhythm and character to them. And of course, that's in people too, different characters and forms and things. These are stones from the nearby beach, which are fascinating. And I have all these micropores. And really, if you talk about, I mean, I can jump around different things, but if you talk about the study of nature, you can talk about the study of form, because you can see here it has one aspect like this, but then one aspect like that. And I'll get into that in a moment with some cheap tracing tricks. And again, these are random pieces of bark, but look at the fascinating stuff. And people who know artists like Jack Kirby, you know, the way he drew stones and wood and stuff, or pick your favorite cartoonist. You can see that they looked at original natural things. And did I show this guy already? Yeah. So, and these are great twigs, like, talk about line work. And I'll show you right now what I'm thinking of here, that it's kind of messy here. So let's, I'm glancing over at my notes over here and to tell people, what are you doing when you're making a drawing, particularly one from imagination, like a comic book artist or a cartoonist would? You're trying to remind people of nature. You're trying to sell it, make it believable. So if you hearken back to the actual rhythms of nature and you kind of absorb that in yourself to some extent, a feeling of what is mechanical versus what is organic and natural, if you put that organic and natural, I've got all this dirt here, if you put the organic and natural feeling into your drawings, I think it's going to sell them a lot more. So let me show you what I mean. I just stumbled across this with my cheapo tracing trick, tracing things. So I'll get this the right way here. What I started doing was this, and I'll show you. What I'm going to do is trace the edge of this, and I'm going to slowly rotate it just to show you what happens. This is almost like a handle. So I'm going to put my pen, it's still in frame here, yeah, vertically. And you get that line. There's a couple of broken lines. I'm going to rotate it a tiny bit and do it again. It's kind of fun. All of this is giving yourself permission to be a kid again, but you're going to see what happens here in a sec. You see how they're like natural waves. There's a change there. As this comes in, I'm going to go off my page here, so I'll shift up. As this projection comes into the silhouette, I've crossed over the other one, but the outline is constantly changing, right? So you have one form. I'll do it with another. I'll switch on to another one in a second, but you have one form, but you have all these different outlines. Like when you look at this in different aspects, it has all kinds of different shapes. And that gets into things like if you're inking and you're doing natural things, you can do different rhythms, and you're trying to create lines that have an interest. Sometimes you might be drawing things and relate different forms, like say you're doing rocks or something. You're trying to get some of that life that you can see in this. Like when I'll do these outlines again. Let's remove that. Let's do it this way. See what we get. A lot of it is just experimenting. This is a little tricky because I've got this projection. So let's do it this way. I think you'll probably see the concept. You can even examine one line and you're like, it inspires you to get life in your lines, and then you could leave gaps. It has to do with the inking and putting life in. If you study these kind of forms, I don't know how well this is showing us in the video, but if you study this kind of thing in real life, real forms, you can start to understand what things nature does or doesn't do. Like, for example, if you're drawing, say you're drawing some pavement, and it's a sidewalk. You know, is nature going to be, of course, if it's a brand new sidewalk, it's just going to be like that, right? It's going to be perfectly made. There's a drain there. But in real life, after a bit of time, you have wind, you have cars hitting it, you have erosion from rain and snow and cracking, winter and summer if it's in a cold place. You're eventually going to have kind of like this. You're going to have random things happen to it. You might have bits of concrete carved away. And again here, say this is the drain. I'm not going to draw it in great detail, but say, you know, the grill of a drain. And again, this stone, the edge they put on sidewalks. This can almost be a living thing too, just like the way twigs and stones are, because they've been subject to the forces of nature, even though a concrete sidewalk is man-made. But you might have a crack here, and then where it's weakened, you get cracks radiating out in the asphalt. If you go look at cracks, because the cars rolling over them has worn it away. And this is really fun. It's like being a kid again, giving yourself permission to be a kid again. It's fun if you're an artist, you go and study this stuff. When you're walking around, just look at it carefully. And you notice all kinds of new things that you didn't see before. And I'm the weirdo that picks up some of this stuff sometimes if I see something particularly good. Like I'm going to work on this here. So say I draw this. Actually, let's do the other side. That's kind of good. I'm using this to get inspired, picking up some clues from it. Say it's some kind of woody, structure. I'm looking at the pattern and trying to simplify it a bit. And again, the art heroes or art gods like Jack Kirby, this is what they're doing. You're simplifying and cartooning. So I could make this right away into a giant, underpass. That's the way my imagination goes. You've got some kind of person here. They're building their campfire or whatever. I don't know, they're sheltering. And then you're going to add other elements. So it's kind of what you do as a kid, you know. You'd imagine some little thing like this kind of being giant. You draw it from different angles. Like I say, I like Twiggy over here. He's my favorite because it's got all these kind of different variations. And even I'll go onto these oak leaves. Look at those great swoopy shapes there. And it's all in nature, right? I'm not drawing it exactly. I'm just using the shapes that you see. And the branching pattern here. There's a sub-vein there. It's really miraculous. It kind of opens your eyes to nature and life too. And this is going to get into something completely different, and we all have our different opinions, but to think that this all just unfolded itself naturally from zero is, in my mind at least, a very, just a completely ridiculous belief that this could unfold itself. But do as thou wilt. Anyway, that's my video for today, and should we do a last tracing? Let's try it. I want to see what happens. Let's go this way. I'm going to trace the top edge of this stony stone. As each form moves into the silhouette, you're going to get different lines. And it's a kind of quirky thing, but it kind of wakes you up to thinking of, like, what kind of lines am I making? Do I always make the same exact boring lines? You can get all kinds of new ideas. You see that rhythm that's naturally created by that? It's kind of a flow. And again, it's like when you see in water, say you've got a pond, you don't want to repeat exactly the same thing. It's just too boring. You want to vary it. It's got a pattern, but you repeat it with variation. And you try and give it some life, and you'll notice that nature does this. It's not like a rigid, like that would be a grid, right? And if I did it with a ruler, it's even more, you know, say I trace the ruler this way and do halves. It's a completely dead thing. Like there's nothing really to, well, my ruler's bumpy, so it's making a little bit of interest, but the idea is that there's nothing really particularly to look at. It's just a mechanical kind of thing. It's dead. It's just endlessly repeating the same thing. But if you look at our world, nature, and you study all this kind of stuff, you see that nature has patterns, form, structure, but it doesn't repeat itself identically. It's like every time is a variation and change. It's almost playing a game with us and enlivening things. So now that's the end of my video, and I hope that gave some kind of inspiration for how to look at drawing differently. I'll talk to you next time, and thanks again for listening.